Welcome to the latest episode of Claw's Corner. Today's guest is an author, poet, performer, voice actor, freelance copywriter, communications professional, talk show host, and creator and producer of The Speakeasy. She is a member of the Authors Guild, the Nonfiction Authors Association, and the Connecticut Poetry Society. She is the author of 6 nonfiction books, as well as a collection of her poetry entitled In Venice I Could Sing and Is Love So Fickle, as well as a haiku chapbook, and collaborating with composer, producer, and musician Gus Mancini on a CD of original music and spoken word entitled Mancini and Martin. Here's what's been said about my next guest. What an amazingly talented woman in her words and her actions, as she helps amplify women's voices and gives them a sense of empowerment. Another says, the heart of creativity and the fire of literature flow from the pen hand. And finally, powerful, powerful! I don't need to tell you that she is a true writer. As you can see, I have a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. Please welcome the extremely talented State of Connecticut National Beat Poet Laureate from 2023 to 2025, Patty Martin to the Claw's Corner. Patty, how the hell are you?
I am excellent. Thank you so much, and I'm delighted to be spending some time with you. I really appreciate it.
I've wanted you on the show. I met you. We'll talk about how we met. But I think I asked you to be on the show maybe 2 years ago when we were doing an open mic together, maybe last year. So I'm so glad to finally have you on because we have a lot to talk about. And you've done, as you can see from my intro, which is basically the Reader's Digest abridged version, you've done a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, I multitask. I try to stay busy. I juggle, and I'm very sanguine. It's like a lot of balls in the air at once, and that's kind of how I like it.
Yeah, me too. I do so many different things, and I love that. I'll write a book. I'll do motivational speaking. I'll do comedy. So all these different things, and I just love keeping busy. And I have so many different interests, and I'm not gonna just do one and stop and just. I like having that ball up in the air as well, juggling it.
Yep, yep.
So, well,
Such creative types.
yeah, I think they're all the same for the most part. But last time I saw you was on March 8th, 2025. I want to talk about this because you read some poetry at the National and International Goddess Festival 2025. I want to talk about that. What exactly is that?
It's held every year by the International National Beat Poetry Foundation, which was formed by Deborah. I hope I'm not going to butcher her name. Deborah Tucson Kildare, and she's a real powerhouse, and she's a real champion of the arts, especially poetry, but all art. She's also an art was voted an arts hero a couple years ago in the area, and so she's been doing the Goddess Festival since I've moved here, since I've known her, since I met her. And even during the pandemic, when we couldn't gather together, and I believe that she did this weekend, there was the event that you were at in Canton, and then she does these Zooms. And during the pandemic, I was involved with the Zoom, and it was phenomenal because there were women from all over the world who got to read 1 or 2 poems. So you heard voices from China and from Australia and from Idaho and California and India and just all over the world. And it was just beautiful to hear so many women's voices from so many corners of the globe, and they were all strong and powerful and different. And that was just really moving to me.
Oh yeah, no, I loved it. The one in Canton, as you mentioned, had even a woman drove all the way from Maine just to be
Yep.
there. Then she was on her way to do one in New Jersey. So it's a very dedicated and passionate group.
Yes, and it was on International Women's Day. March is Women's National Women's Month, but that date, the 8th, is International Women's Day. So that's why she had it on that day, and it was very fitting.
Oh, most
And
definitely.
everybody's a goddess. Even the guys who got up and read were goddess. They have that. They can have that, share that goddess and vibe, that goddess energy. We all have that yin yang inside of us.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna give a shout out because he's gonna be on my show soon. David Henry read some poetry. He's a
Oh
great
yes,
poet, and I've read his books as well, and I love the stuff. Yeah, so there were guys, there were women. I mean, there were so many different people there, and it was great that everybody had a chance. Because part of it, I'll mention people who weren't there. They had, I think, two people that were there to read 4 or 5 different poems, and then they
To
had open
feature
mic.
readers,
Yeah,
yes.
features,
Mhm.
and then they had an open mic, so anybody can get up and read whatever they wanted, and so it was great. So people got a chance to
Yeah.
express themselves. So I mentioned in the intro, and we talked about what it was. You were the Connecticut Beat Poet Laureate from 2023 to just very recently. What?
Well, I'm actually turning over the baton in September
Ah,
at the National International Beat Poetry Festival, which is every Labor Day in Riverton.
okay.
And so it's a 2-year gig, and then then you pass it over to the next Beat Poet Laureate. And it was such an honor. I was like so surprised and so shocked when she announced me at the event, and I was like, what? So it
Well,
was
yes.
great.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about because what exactly is a Beat Poet Laureate, and how does one become one, and what are your duties?
Well, Debbie and her team are the ones who decide who is the Beat Poet Laureate, and they have them from all over. Like there's different states that have Beat Poet Laureates, not just Connecticut. And then they also have lifetime Beat Poet Laureates, and they have national Beat Poet Laureates, and they are really just giving you the honor and distinction of recognizing your work as being an important voice. And so it really truly is an honor. And the fact that a lot of people don't know what beat is. And it's like I joke, I'm from Darien. I don't have funk and I don't have beat. It's like we just don't do that. But it's not what you think. It's not like you have to wear a beret and bong. It's not beat neck.
Yeah, okay.
And actually, it was Jack Kerouac who I can read this. He coined the phrase "beat generation,"
Hmm.
and to him, beat is a shortened version of beatitude,
Ah,
not beat up. And there's a spiritual quality because he coined the phrase "beat generation." Um, and railed against those who thought it meant beat down, heedless, rootless, criminal, gangsta. For him, it meant beato, the Italian for beatific, and to be in a state of beatitude like St. Francis, trying to love all life, trying to be utterly sincere with everyone, practicing endurance and kindness. And so he claimed that that's what Beat Generation peers are. They try to cultivate joy of heart in, quote, a mad modern world of multiplicities and millions. And I think, we can kind of say that hasn't gone away. So
yeah.
so we need positive voices, not that subject matters aren't moving or powerful or difficult, but the whole impetus behind it is to be truthful and shed light, and shared honestly. And I really believe that is at the core of any kind of art, whether it's visual art or poetry or any other literature or photography. I mean, that element of truth, and I think there's an element of in my words, not Jack Kerouac's, but I think when you're honest and you approach subjects with honesty and integrity and actually fearlessly,
Hmm.
even difficult subjects, I think there's a certain element of like the Greek dramas, the Greek core, the cathartic element, because a lot of times we move through this world, we don't have that kind of discourse with people. It's like, how you doing? Oh, I'm great. We don't always have the opportunity to really get into heart to hearts and how certain things in our lives may be throwing us off balance or even being joyful. It's just nice to have that kind of a sharing. And I think it gives people a sense of um, release and being understood, because it's like, wow, I'm not the only one who feels like that.
Hmm.
Oh, wow. And I think that is a nice release for people. And as an artist, you are really kind of showing your guts.
Yeah.
And you hope that it's accepted in the, as it is.
Yep. So how were you selected? Do you have to enroll your name into something and they select from different
No,
posts? They just picked you.
yeah, because I've gone, I mean, obviously they know me. I've gone to events and readings and open mics and other festivals. So they got to know me and my work. And
Yeah.
I was absolutely blown away and thrilled when they called my name. It was like, well, what? You know? So yeah, I take it as an honor, and your duties are just to spread poetry wherever you can, like Johnny Appleseed with you know, with seed.
Yeah.
You know, you just do what you can to do readings or events or like your show, for
Yep.
example. It's just spreading, you know, spreading words and spreading poetry and spreading the, you know, hopefully your love of creativity.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I've seen you several times perform, and I've read some of your books, and it's well deserved.
Thank
Yep.
you. Thank you for
Yeah.
saying that.
I have to ask you
Because
because
nobody plinks you with a wand and says, yeah, you're a poet. You're like, really?
yeah. Well, I want to talk about that in a second, what people consider poetry and different kinds of poetry. But before I do that, I think this is Jack Kerouac. I was watching a little like a biography on him. It was probably like only 20 minutes long, so it's a very short one. Isn't he the poet that wrote a story that was one long sentence?
That might have been Allen Ginsberg. I'm not sure.
Okay, because I watched like there was a time when I was reading Charles Bukowski, and I read
Okay.
his book, and then I saw the movie Barfly with Mickey Rourke and
Oh
uh,
yeah. Ugh,
Factotum with
tough.
Matt Dillon. So I got into this whole kick, and then after that, you go down that rabbit hole. So I did watch a documentary on Ginsberg. I did watch one on Kerouac. So it might have been Allen Ginsberg. It was around the same.
You know, one of them, but you know, it's all about part of it is like making your own, not making your own rules, but open expression without you know, restrictions to it. So yeah, it's experimental in that sense.
Yeah.
Like E. E. Cummings would do on the page, you know.
Well, I love that because I think a lot of people who don't really know what poetry is think that it has to rhyme, it has to be maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs, but poetry could be anything you want it to be. It could be just your free form of expression, you putting your feelings on there, like we were talking about. So
Yeah.
for you, do you have a certain kind of poetry that you stick to, or you just go with whatever flows out of your onto the page?
I don't I kind of go with what flows out of me. Some of my poems are long, some are short. They hardly ever rhyme, except for the occasional children's poem. I just get a feeling or an impression or an image, and I kind of run with it. And sometimes it really surprises me where it takes me. So that's part of the fun. Otherwise, sometimes I do have a point or a purpose, but there's usually some kind of a derailment along the way, which is kind of fun.
Yep. I didn't read all of your poetry and I didn't hear all of your poetry, but out of all the ones that I've read, I think there was only one poem that rhymed, and it was called Kiss. It was very
Oh,
short.
yes.
Yeah.
I wrote that for my goddaughter when she was born. It was the 4-line poem. I
Yeah.
think it should be calligraphied. It's kisses, kisses on my nose, kisses, kisses on my toes, kisses morning, noon, and night, kisses, kisses never bite.
That's the one.
And
So
I have a children's one. It's actually an acupuncturist I know had it calligraphied and hung in her office because she treated a lot of children and she was dealing with you know, sugar, for lack of a better word, sugar addiction or kids being overly attached to sugar. And it's called Have You Seen the Jelly Belly? And it giggles when it wiggles and it wiggles when it walks, and its cheeks get kind of rubbery each time it tries to talk. It must eat lots of gooey delights into the wee hours of the night and gobble everything in sight with one big jelly belly bite.
I love it.
Does it eat too many candy bars and watch too much TV? If I'm not very careful, it could turn into me. So,
You know what's impressive is so far you've recited 2 or 3 poems, but you didn't have to look at it. You have everything memorized. I love that.
well, they're easy when they're rhymey. The
Yeah, yeah.
the other one, Jack and I, this is probably a good time to bring up, during the pandemic,
Hmm.
Jack Sheedy, who is my husband, um, we were he was one of the first people I met when I moved to Torrington, and we became friends.
Hmm.
And during the pandemic, we were like a little pod together. We didn't really get together, but we were in touch, and we did something that we'd like to publish. I have to go through and pick out mine, which I haven't done yet. But we took turns for an entire year, 365 days, writing a poem a day, where it was like a poetic tennis match. I would start the first stanza and send it to him. He'd do the second and send it back. I'd do the third and send it back, and he'd do the final one. And the next time we'd switch roles, and he'd start. And they were ridiculous, they were sublime, they were deep, they were stupid, they were everything. And he would make me nuts because not only would he throw me curveballs, like I would think the poem's going this way, and then he'd send me the stanza that totally like veered it off my track, and I had to respond. But what was worse is that he's a rhymey guy.
Hmm.
And so he would send me some rhymes, and I'm like, after a while, I'm like, dude, I don't do rhymes. I am not gonna, you can rhyme all you want from now into Kingdom Come. I am not gonna do another rhyme.
I love it. Well, that's impressive. So that's not published yet, you said. That's still just
No, we have 365 poems. We did it for exactly a year. It was from April. Do you know the date, Jack? April 6th to April 6th.
wow.
And so, we're not going to publish 365 poems,
You could do
but
different you could do more volumes. Come out with
yeah,
two
there
books
you
for the three
go.
of us. I would love
But
that.
we're each going to pick six,
Yeah.
which would be about a maximum number of poems that you want to subject people to in a book.
Well, it's
Six
impressive.
per six per month. Yeah, so it's 12 times 12.
Yeah.
So
Well, I definitely would love to hear that or read that sometime. So please, I would love to have it, maybe like different volumes, but I think they should definitely be published. And I think the public would love to see that. And I have a question about how you did that because I know when I was doing comedy and even writing a book, whenever I tried to do something, I would have brain freeze. But if I wasn't thinking about it and I wasn't even, it would just, everything would come to me and I would just, wouldn't be able to stop writing. I'd come up with all these ideas. So for you to do that, it's like, all right, I have to write a new one every single day. Did you have
it
that
was a
same
commitment.
difficulty? Yeah.
Pardon?
So did you have the same difficulty or does everything just come so easily too? You're like, all right, well, I know Jack's rhymes a little bit, but I can take it from there and make this. Or did you have to sit down and like really think about it and say, I have really, right now I have nothing.
Well, when you have a commitment and it involves somebody else, you kind of have a tendency to want to step up.
Yeah.
And some were easier than others to come up with. So, like I said, they were ridiculous and they were deep. Like sometimes it's just like, I mean, this is oversimplification, but it's like, oh, the sun came up this morning. You know what I mean? It was, you had to have a point of departure. Other times, something really moved you and was like a lot deeper. And some were very silly. Some were really thought provoking. And always, it's like when Jack would send me a stanza, it's like a prompt. You have to respond to it in a way that speaks back to it. You don't go off on a different tangent. So that gave it some form.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask you, so where did your love of poetry come from?
I've always written, actually. I've always liked words and wordplay, and I'm actually not good at the math and science things. I've always been
Well,
good at the English and the humanities and the drama. Um, and I used to write as a kid. I'd write I'd make reading cards for my parents. And I think it was in seventh grade, maybe for a while there, and I still have them. I actually made some Peanuts comics where I'd sit there on my little, I'm dating myself now, the little TV tray,
yeah.
foldable ones
Oh yeah.
with like the paper and the ruler and I would make up cartoons with the Peanuts characters in them, and especially Snoopy. I loved Snoopy.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. And then later on, one of my clients, I worked for 8 years for the Lego Toy Company doing their kids magazine. I came up with the name. It was Brick Kicks magazine, and I got to interview kids, the builder of the month, and I got to write stories about different models and things. And my favorite thing was there was a cartoon segment in it, and it was the adventures of Brick Biltmore and Comet the dog with his friend Bridget. And so I'd come up with the comic strip, and then they would send it to an artist who was out in Portland, Oregon, and he would do the airbrush and do the do the actual illustrate the cartoon itself. And when I got my copy of the magazine, the first thing I did was turn Brick Biltmore. And I had one or two rude things like that shocked me, like when they came out with a Lego set of the castles and knights and things like that. I had Brick and Bridget and Comet visit Ollie the inventor and go back to the time of, like, the Knights of the Round Table and stuff. And the only reason I named the inventor Ollie was so that Comet, he had a bubble over his head like Snoopy. And it was, good golly, Ollie, it really works. And then and then when the cartoon came out, they changed his name to Albert. And it was like, good golly, Albert, it really works. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So I called up the guy, the marketing department, the head, and I'm like, what happened? Well, it turned out it was during the Oliver North trials. And for some ungodly reason, they thought that people would make the leap from Ollie the inventor to Oliver North.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's like PC to the max. It's like so wrong.
Exactly.
But I had a lot of fun with it, and that's kind of a collector's thing to me. It's like, good golly, Albert, I would never write that line. I'm like, tell me that you don't want that name, and let me do something else with the line that kids would like.
Hey, you can turn it into a female and make it Holly or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't have the same kind of flow. Good morning, Albert. Good morning.
And it was so creative. I'm sure it was after Albert Einstein. I mean, hello, it's like.
But what gets me mad is that there might have been one or two people that probably would never even read that, would see it and make a comment, and then they're going to bow down to those two or three people that might get angry, that don't even buy their paper. That whole thing with the PC makes me probably just as angry as you.
Yep. But, so that was like kind of funny.
Yeah.
That happened. I'm like, really? You've changed Comet. I love Comet. He's my mouthpiece, He gets to say all the fresh stuff.
So after that happened, did you continue writing that comic, or said, I'm done?
Oh yeah. That was just one issue. It was,
okay.
It was just, and I addressed it, and it was like fine. And
good.
There was another one I won. There was another battle I won where at Legoland Park in Billund, Denmark. At the time, they didn't have one in the U.S. like they do now. They were making this huge bust of Sitting Bull. And it was made out of millions and millions of Lego bricks. And it was assembled with cranes and glue. I mean, it was like ginormous. So the cover story was on, this bust of Sitting Bull and it being made and what have you. And so I wrote about, Sitting Bull, and I found this amazing book in the Vallejo, New York Free Library, because Native Americans have an oral tradition, not so much a written tradition. But I found this book that had letters and things that the natives had written, and one of them was from a native who was at the Battle of Little Bighorn.
Oh wow.
And he wrote, they thought they were doing what they had to do, but they thought Custer was a very admirable adversary, and they had to fight him even though they respected him. And the comment was, even though they won, there was no dancing and singing that night. In other words, they didn't celebrate, whoop, whoop, we won. And so I quoted that in the article. And I said, the Native Americans had this perspective and we had that perspective. So anyway, I was instructed to take out references to the Battle of Little Bighorn. And I'm like, you can't write about Sitting Bull and take out that part of history. That's like major. And so I actually won that battle, but they wanted me to literally whitewash history.
Oh my God.
I won though. Yeah, yeah.
That's almost as bad as like saying, well, you can't say sitting bull because that might offend people who have hemorrhoids who can't sit down.
Right, right, right. I mean, it's funny, there's certain things and that still exists. There's certain, censorship or things have to go through 96,000 eyes before
Yeah.
they're approved. I mean, I don't know if you heard this is a little off topic, but I love it because it's marketing snafu. I used to have a collection um I would call typos glad Patty didn't, Patty's glad she didn't make, you know. And so anyway, made me feel better because you can't read your own stuff. And it was fun. Like Trader Joe's at one point, one of them was they had these Thanksgiving stickers with cartoon turkeys and they said Google Google. So that was like in my typos I'm glad I didn't make. But anyway, with this particular situation, oh my God, I derailed my thought. What was I talking? I just went off on this different direction. Um, oh,
We go down
I,
many rabbit holes in this show, so feel free.
I know, but I mean, it had to do with typos and
We were talking
political.
about how we were talking about political correctness and then typos, and the last thing we were talking about, I made the comment. You were talking about the sitting bull.
Yeah, yeah. It will probably come back to me, but it was, oh gosh.
Okay, no problem. We'll come back to that. So I want to talk about. We'll move on, and if you remember it, just say, "Rich, I remember what we were talking about." Because believe me, I'm going to be doing that plenty of times in the interview as well.
Okay. Yeah, it's like your mind is like popcorn. It's like, oh yeah, over here, there's popcorn, and over there, and where was I?
Oh, yeah. I always, as soon as I see that shiny new object, I'm right there, and then I
Yeah,
forget
yeah,
all about the
yeah.
thing I'm talking about. So I completely understand. So,
Oh, PC. It was PC. Yeah. Oh, I know what it was. I
okay.
remember now. The movie that came out, Wicked,
Oh yeah.
about, okay. Well, they came out with Wicked dolls that were like Barbie dolls.
Hmm.
And they had the wrong website.
Oh, I read about that.
It was supposed to be wickedmovie.com.
It went to the porno site.
Yeah, and it was wicked.com.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, how many people looked at that and let that through? And the article that I was reading said, oh, Mattel says like, throw out the boxes or black out the
Yeah.
website. And I'm like, if I have that, no way, that's going to be worth a whole lot of money one day.
Oh, exactly. Well, I think the funny thing is all you have to do to get into that site is say, "Yes, I am above 18 years old."
I know.
You click on
Oh,
that,
you
and you can
checked
get
it
right
out, did you? Huh? No.
good 4 or 5 times, and I said, "No." I just wanted to make sure it was the right site.
I know. But can you imagine? And somebody said, somebody made a comment, oh, somebody's head's going to roll. And I'm like, no, it's not one person. If you're talking about a corporation like Mattel, they are looking at, I mean, it's gone through meeting after, approvals after approvals. It's not one person. It's just that everybody kind of woo-hoo, you know.
Yeah. Well, it just shows that like how most people aren't even paying attention. Yeah, that looks good. Send it down to the next guy. All right, I'm happy with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Nobody's even
Rubber
paying attention.
stamp it, done. Next.
Exactly. Of course, they'll have to find one person as a scapegoat to make the public happy. Oh, we took care of that. Don't worry about it. And the one guy, probably, like you said, he was a part of the machine that there were many people involved, but he took the hit for it. But yeah, I did hear
Yeah,
about that. I laughed a lot about that one.
yeah. And one of the nonfiction books I wrote, I was asked to write by the publisher, Great Quotations in Lombard, Illinois, was I called it Growing Up in Toyland,
Hmm.
our all-time best loved toys. And it was a book about toys baby boomers grew up with that are still on the market today. And I had to do a whole lot of research and background, and Mattel and Barbie and GI Joe were of course iconic and in there, but there were a couple of very peculiar stories that I was told off the record
Oh.
by by toy distributors. um and one that's not off the record is the Duncan yo-yo.
Hmm.
The yo-yo was a weapon of war in I think it was the Philippines. They
Wow.
would go up in trees and like bonk their enemies over the head and then retract it up. So that was, and Slinky, I mean, and well, Slinky too was part of during the war. It had to do with some weaponry. It was a particular tungsten spring. It was tiny. It fell off the guy's desk, and he noticed it went the boing, the boing, the boing, the boing. And he's like, that would make a great toy if we made it big. And it, which is how that, and the same thing with Silly Putty. It was like a plastic used in explosives, and the guy put it on an envelope and picked it up and saw that it picked up letters. So that's how Play-Doh was born, from, war artillery planning.
I think the most genius toy ever is the guy who invented the pet rock. It's like,
oh yeah,
it's like, who would ever think that would become popular?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a rock. You put it there. Oh, it's your pet. Okay, wow, this is great. I'm going to be a billionaire.
Yeah, right. Some things you don't know why they catch on, but they do.
I know.
It's like the Zeitgeist of the world or something.
Well, that's why I always tell people. People say, "Oh, I could think of that." Well, think of something. Don't just say it. If you do it, you never know what's going to catch with the public. You never know what's the next big thing. So if you have a weird idea, just put it out there. You never know.
You never know. Stranger things have happened.
That is funny. I never knew those stories, so I'm glad you told me those. So you, in my intro, I said that you have, was it 6 nonfiction books and a collection of poetry in the haiku chapbook? But for the 6 nonfiction books, what were they about?
Okay, well, the first one was actually illustrated word puns, so it wasn't exactly nonfiction. And my brother is a great artist, and he actually did the illustrations. And I went to the stationery and greeting card show in Manhattan because, at the Javits Center, because even though I was a writer, I'm like, well, nobody, I'm not a household name, so maybe they'll make uh, uh, greeting cards out of it first, and then it can become a book. So I had a little marketing kit put together with some of the illustrations, and it was word plays, word puns, and I was inspired by John Lennon. All of because he liked puns. Yeah. And it was things like "Don't Give Up the Crypt," and "To Kill a Mockingbird" and stuff. And so I went and I met these people at Great Quotes, and they were like, "Ah, ha, ha, this is really funny. Ha, ha. Wouldn't this make a great book?" And it became a book right away. And then it became greeting cards. Ah. And then I did one because I love Native American culture. It was a research project called Ancient Echoes, Native American Words of Wisdom. And it was poems, prayers, songs, psalms by different Native American tribes and cultures, because they were all different. It's not like you can't say Native American and they all have the same belief system and the same practices. Mm-hmm. And I really went out of my way doing the research. It wasn't just the top 10, top 10 known Native Americans, like Chief Joseph and Sitting Bull. And I was like in tears, researching it. It was very moving. And then there was one called Words from Great Women. They asked me to do a nutshell profile on 12 women and then a medley of quotes by different women. And it was kind of like negotiation, like, okay, I'll give you Golda Meir if you give me George Sand, So that was fun. And then there's a book, the Growing Up in Toyland was one of the books. And then there was a book that led to The Right Side of 40, which was my next book by the coffee table book I work with a photographer on, called The Right Side of 40, mm-hmm. which has interviews and black and white portraits of 55 women between the ages of 40 and 63. And I interviewed over 100 women for the book, and the black and white portraits are amazing. But the precursor to that was it was on women and stress. And I wanted to name it Stress to Excess, a Chill Out Guide for the Harried Woman.
I like that.
And they called it Modern Woman, a Stress Relief Manual. Ah. And I'm like, okay. And then, but I did a lot of interviews. I did a lot of research on stress, which is like way more known now. But like I was reading about Jon Kabat-Zinn before anybody knew who he was, on stress and meditation. And and different ways, what stress does to the body and what causes it and how to deal with it. And then I interviewed women on how they deal with their stress. And it was funny because when the book first came out, I had been talking to the publisher and we agreed it should, it should be really appealing. It would have like, an illustration of pretty flowers on it, whatever. And then I get my samples of the book and it was like, and I knew a guy designed it, no offense, but I knew because it was like all typography
Yeah.
and it was like stress, 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 and like all different sizes, like coming at you. It was just a whole cover of nothing but the word stress.
Mm.
And I got that, and I'm like, what? And I called the publisher and I said, I feel like I've just had an ugly baby and I don't know who the father is. What happened? And and anyway, they changed the cover and reissued it because, not because of me, but because they had complaints from bookstores that said, love the book, hate the cover.
Oh my God. It-
I know.
you know what I hate about these publishers is that they say, "Oh yeah, we love your work. We want to publish it. We believe in you 100%. Now change everything."
Yeah.
Because
Did that
I've
happen to you with your book?
no, I'm self-published, so I could say and do whatever I want, which I liked. But I did interview many authors who had this very similar stories where they said, "We love this, but change the characters, change the story. We don't like the dialogue." I'm like, well, what do you like about my story? What do you want? And so they're going back and forth with the publisher.
Yep, yep. Yeah, that happens. But they're the ones, if you're lucky enough to have someone who's doing it, and I mean, it's not necessarily the way you envisioned it, but they're the ones who are bringing it out into the world.
Almost, yeah,
So,
definitely. Because
but it is weird. It's like you have to give up a certain amount of ownership when you're dealing with a committee,
yeah.
you know.
Well, I don't know if you are familiar with Greg Iles. He's a great author. He's written tons of books. But what I like about him is that every book is a different genre. And he said after the first book was a huge hit, he said after that the publisher wanted them to write the same book with just a different title. He says I'm gonna try something different. He wrote the second book and it became a big hit. And then they're like, oh, you could do whatever you want. Don't worry about it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was until
Okay.
then, but if he didn't take that chance and write a second book in a different genre, he would and did what the publisher wanted to do, he would have wrote the same book over and over and over again.
Well, I'm gonna have to check him out. Is
Yeah.
he's a novelist?
Yep, novelist. Greg Iles. He's out of Mississippi. He's a great author. He's got so many different types of stories in there. You'll the first one I read that really caught my interest is called The Footprints of God. It's not a religious book at all, but it's definitely very interesting. Check that one out, and then it goes on to like so many different. I can't remember them offhand right now, but there's probably like about 10, 15 books he has right now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
Good for him.
yeah,
Wow. I will check him out. Thanks.
yep. All right, you're very welcome. And so
Yeah.
you're getting me into poetry. I'm getting into some some other authors.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah,
this.
I know. I do not have the great American novel. I like nonfiction and I like poetry and well, we had talked about this previous. I love research. It's like a rabbit hole. I could spend my days just researching stuff. Like I submitted a children's book about a bumblebee and a rhymey, and I hope it comes to life, in the next year. But I did a whole lot of research on bumblebees, and I was just fascinated. It's like I love bumblebees; they're my new totem right now. you know, they recognize faces, they remember who's nice to them, who's not. If they see you as a friend, they let you pet them when they're
Really?
resting. I like, I love these guys.
Wow, see,
And
I didn't know anything about that. That's really interesting because
yeah,
people don't realize like how important bees are to our survival.
yep,
Like if because there
yep.
was this whole thing years ago, the bees were dying off, and they thought maybe it was because of the cell phone towers, and maybe that has part of it. But no, I know this is what the documentary was saying years ago. But they said if the bees just die off, I think they said we only have like 30 days before the whole population because with the pollination and
The
everything.
pollination.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's the pesticides and stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's well, it sort of delved into that as well. This was probably like 2009, 2010 when cell phones were becoming really popular. That's why that was pretty
Okay.
scary. And then afterwards, they went deeper into the pesticides, which obviously is way more believable than cell phone towers, I think.
Does cell phone have anything to do with it? The electromagnetic waves?
That's what well, they were saying that like the waves were confusing them and they couldn't find their nests and they were just dropping to the ground and they were finding bees all over the place. But
That
they
happens to me if I use my cell phone too much. No, no, get that
there's
away from
something
me.
to it.
Throw
That's
it
funny.
across the room.
No, but you know what I love about you, because just like with you would research for this show, I do so much research on each
Yep.
guest, and I love it. I learned so many new things, so many things. An example would be I interviewed this guy from a movie that was one of my favorite movies growing up called The Warriors, about these gangs in New York. He only had one line in the movie. He and I did a 3.5 hour interview because he had such an interesting
Wow.
life. He worked with a rap band called the Fat Boys. Then he worked with AIDS patients in the early '80s when it was, or
Well,
mid '80s when it was really bad. But he had so many interesting stories and did so many eclectic things. And we kept on talking, and he goes, "Dude, man, I got to go to sleep sometime." He's all right. One more story, and then we kept on going for another half hour. But it's the same thing. And I know with you, when I was researching you, you really get into research. I guess when we were talking about, you had a monthly lifestyle column, and with that, you took a trapeze class, you participated in a sweat lodge, you would do whatever
yeah,
you could to get the story done.
yeah. Oh yeah. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great because they gave me license to run with scissors. I mean, it was my column and I could write about whatever I wanted, which is very, at first I'm like, I don't know if I have anything to say. And then all of a sudden I'm like this monster,
Yeah.
like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. And anything became, licensed to do it. I did surveys, like things people do when they're on hold, like that, like silly things. But then it's like there was uh, a trapeze class that was, well, I was living upstate New York at the time. There's the guy, he actually used to work with Barnum and Bailey Circus doing trapeze, and it was called Trapeze for Transformation.
Hmm.
And so it's like not just like he floats through the air with the greatest of ease. And he was married to a woman from Mongolia who was a contortionist who actually had toured with Paul McCartney. He had some contortionists doing their things, and it was a fundraiser for Tibet.
Hmm.
And so she performed in this like silver, shiny, spandex outfit, and she was doing things the body was never intended to do. And I'm like horrified, going, stop doing that, stop doing that, you're gonna break your back, what are you doing? But it was great, and I took it because I wanted to challenge myself, because I'm not really afraid of heights,
Hmm.
but I'm very respectful of heights, and they
Yeah.
make me dizzy. It's like, I think because I have no earth in my astrological chart, I'm like a helium balloon. I'm like all fire and air, and a teeny bit of water, but no earth.
Yeah.
And so I took this class, and it was great, but it was like hysterical because you had to practice like low on the ground, and then you go up and you're above the treetops. And the scariest part, and then there's of course a net. The scariest part for me was the ladder going up to the platform. It
Yeah.
was straight up and it was metal, and you are in stocking feet, and there's no net under the ladder.
Hmm.
And it's slippery when you have stocking feet on metal bars. So that was a challenge. And then you get up to the platform. And now these you would know unless you did it. They strap you in a harness, a belt,
Hmm.
and you get to the edge and you hang your toes over. They call it hang 10. And then they go 1, 2, 3, whoop, and you're supposed to like bunny hop out.
Yeah.
But they didn't tell you when you're holding the trapeze, it weighs a freaking ton. And it's like pulling, it's like it's pulling you out there. So anyway, I did it, and I actually did it how to do it twice. And you swing and swing and swing, and then they teach you how to do a loop-de-loop, head over heels, and then you're supposed to like jump into this other person who grabs you. I didn't get that far. But with the loop-de-loop, I could not, I was like swinging my legs, and they were going slower and slower. And I'm literally, my mind got the better of me, and I decided I could not do it.
Hmm.
And I was literally hanging from the trapeze bar, dangling in midair, still arguing with the instructor. I can't do it. Yes, you can. I can't do it. So I'm like dangling it. So
That's
anyway,
funny.
I dropped to the net, and so they're like, do it again, do it again. So I did it, and I was able to do the loop de loop. So that was, but that was what I wrote in the column, and you never know. We're our own great experiments. As long as we, try to make sane choices. I'm not sure.
Well, it's funny. I'm the same way as you. I'm not a big fan of heights, but I have these that false sense of security. Like I've done skydiving, I've done gliders,
Oh, no,
I've
no,
done.
no,
Oh
no.
yeah, no, I loved it, but I always feel like I didn't what they call it, tandem. So I did it that way, where somebody was on my back. I'm like, oh, what's gonna happen? But then you never think about. You hear these stories afterwards, like how the guy had a heart attack and those
Oh my
ships
God.
open. But it was too funny for me. I can send you the video later. But
Yeah.
I did the stand-up skydiver. I was doing my stand-up act as I was going down.
Oh,
There's-
I have to see
yeah.
that, my Lord.
And then the guy, it's so funny because I didn't realize he was doing this during when I was doing my stand-up act. The guy in my back is going, oh, he's making fun of me, going like this. He's crazy, loco. It's funny. Then you're supposed to land on your ass and sort of slide. And I said, so the person before me says, I landed on 2 feet. I said, I'm going to land on 1 foot. So I was able to land on 1 foot. I hopped around. So it was a great experience. I had so much fun doing it. But if I had to jump by myself, I'd be like, yeah, no way. I'm not doing that.
Whoa,
Yeah. And then I
that's
did,
crazy. Good. Good for you.
and what's the one? My mind went blank on where you're the big chute when you rise off the boat on the water.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. A parasailing.
Parasailing. I did that too, and it was great because there was nobody there when I went there. It was in Cape Cod where my parents live, and they said, "Oh, just the other day, Adam Sandler was here filming a movie, and we're talking about that." And he goes, "He just, yeah, since nobody's here, I'll just let you go up as long as you want." He goes, "We never let anybody get this high. I can't
Oh,
swim at all, and I'm just,
you can't swim.
no, I can't." But I just was loving that, and then like they're like they had me go down, dip, and I went back up again. So,
Oh, did
but
you have a life vest on?
I definitely had a life vest on just in case.
Okay.
But I'm like, yeah, I gotta try it. It's an experience. Like
Did you like it?
I loved it. I would definitely do it again.
Wow.
But
Oh,
trapeze, I
that,
never tried.
yeah, I think you would like it. It's like challenging yourself, especially if you're with people who know what they're doing and they have the right safety stuff set up, you're really, you're in good hands. I mean,
Well, that's what I always say. It's like the false sense of security. I'm like, they know what they're doing. Nothing's gonna happen to me. Then you don't think about it until afterwards, and you hear all these stories. Like zip lining, I love too. Then you hear
oh my
stories
God.
where like how, oh yeah, well, somebody just fell up, but then I mean, most of the time it's from stupidity. Like the one person, I took my niece one time, and she's like, nobody ever gets hurt, and I'm like, no. And then I found out later that somebody just died a couple months before, but the reason is that she unhooked herself and fell. So I mean, it was.
Oh my God.
And I said, thank God she did not know that story before we did the zip lining.
Whoa,
Nobody ever
whoa.
gets hurt in this. Come on.
You're hooked in. You're fine. Oh
Exactly.
no.
So I'm just like you. I love, like as you know, I did motivational speaking before. And so one of the biggest things for me was step out of your comfort zone. Try something new. Life
Yeah.
for me, I hate the same routine. It just gets boring to me. I
Yep.
want to try something new and something that maybe you're uncomfortable with now. A couple months from now, that's going to be comfortable. Then try something new and always push yourself to try. So I'm just like you when it comes to that. Like, let's try this.
Yeah,
What could
yeah, give it
possibly
a
go wrong?
shot. Yeah, right. Yeah, and the sweat lodge was pretty amazing. It really was amazing. Because it was with a real, it was a real deal. It wasn't just a touristy thing. It was with a tribe upstate New York, and they had you walk through the burning sage for purification, and
Wow.
you're in and out of the lodge. They built the lodge, they built the fire. You help them with it, and it's sacred to them. So you have to honor that, and it was, that was very moving too. So yeah, and like I said, I love Native American culture, so having that experience was very profound for me. So yeah.
Have you ever tried wire walking yet? High
Oh
wire?
gosh. No, but Philippe Petit lived
Yes.
near Woodstock, and he would do stuff around there. I never saw him though.
I was going to ask you this. I love that documentary. That
Yeah.
is the great where he's going between the twin towers. I mean,
Oh, No way,
I know.
Jose.
No,
No.
it's great that what I love is like I mean obviously it's pre 9/11 and they never ever would I mean the way he snuck in there was hiding he never would have gotten away with that if not I mean 'cause I know the buildings are gone now but like if he tried to anywhere else because the security had been so tough but that whole documentary was and the guy was nuts. I love when the cops were waiting for him and he kept on just messing with him going back a little bit like come on then he's like
Come get me. Like,
yeah, that was so you said you never met him, but he's
no, I never
very
met him. I knew somebody who actually worked for him, but I never met him. They were like an assistant to him.
and that was in you said he lived in Woodstock, New York.
Yep.
Huh.
Outside, near at the time. I don't know, maybe he lived other places too, but at the time he was hanging out in the Woodstock area.
And you mentioned you lived in Woodstock, right?
I lived in West Saugerties, like 10 miles from downtown Woodstock and 10 miles from Saugerties. So yeah, yeah.
Well, the reason I asked that is because there's a place I go. I haven't been there in a little while. It's called the Colony. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Oh my God, I performed there.
I was going to ask you that because that's such a great place. I've seen several of my friends' bands play there, and I was going to ask you if you ever performed there because that is the perfect venue for you.
Yeah, it's one of the few remaining places in Woodstock that does have live shows.
Hmm.
I was in a couple of, well, they had some poetry readings there. Um, one of the pieces I'd like to read tonight, with Jack, I wrote for an Armistice Day event. Some friends of mine organized there.
Hmm.
Um, and then I actually was performed in the Vagina Monologues that they did there. So yeah, the colony's wonderful. In February it's a little cold,
Yeah.
but it wasn't that great. But it was it's a beautiful venue. Yeah, yeah. One of my stomping grounds.
Yeah. It was funny. The
And
first
that's
time I
where I
ever.
co-hosted a radio station once a month. A friend of mine I met when I moved up there has he still has it. He was one of the founders of the Woodstock station, and he has a Sunday talk show. And I actually called him up um, when I was home. I was sick, and it was after my first book, Worms of Wisdom, came out, and he invited callers. It had to do with a presidential election when Ross Perot was running, and he wanted people's in. And for some ungodly reason, I guess because I was sick and on antibiotics, I called in. And he could be a little harassing when you
Mhm.
called in.
Yeah.
And so I called in, and he's like, what's your name? Where are you from? What do you do? And when I said I'm a writer, he goes, oh, yeah, right. You're a writer. Yeah, sure. Right. What do you write? And so I told him my book was Worms of Wisdom. He's like, call me after the show. And I did, and we became friends. And, I would co-host, I still could if I get up early enough to go there on a Sunday or stay over. I met a lot of good people doing that, a lot of interesting, talk about research, a lot of characters and profound thinkers and crazy people, like Patrick Carlin was on every Sunday. George
Oh,
Carlin's brother. Yeah,
yeah.
I called him Human Hurricane.
Yeah. How's his sense of humor? Because George Carlin's my all-time favorite comedian. I said there's nobody that
Oh,
can match him because he's the only person I know that stayed relevant for the 50 years that he was doing comedy. From the Hippy Dippy Weatherman all the way up until 2008 when he was talking about anthrax in the water, airport security. Everything that he talked about back then is so relevant even now.
still relevant.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
more relevant, I think, in some cases.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, I mean, unfortunately he was his older brother,
Yeah.
and he did pass away a few years ago. And he'd come in, and like I said, I call him the human hurricane. He'd come bursting in full of life.
Yeah.
And he would always comment on what was going on in the show. And he could be very, very funny. And he was actually in a show I put together with a friend of mine. We did a couple Valentine's Day shows. We called them a celebration of love and eros, and we were the hosts. And she was Molly from County Cork. She put on this brogue, and she called me Pookie Mellow. I was this like hippy dippy, airhead.
Yeah.
And we did our poetry and stuff, but we had musicians and comedians and poets and all kinds of people on. And Patrick actually performed at it, as did our friend Joe Raiola, who was the senior editor at Mad Magazine, and
Wow,
he
you
did
have some good guests.
stand up routine too. And but Patrick was very irreverent,
Yeah.
not irrelevant, irreverent.
Yeah,
And
That's funny.
He adored his brother, and for his 80th birthday, it was one of the few times that I was given an assignment. Like the host of the Woodstock Roundtable, Doug, said, "Oh, we're going to be celebrating Patrick's birthday on air. He's turning 80. Write a poem." And I'm like, okay. And it's like, I know Patrick, but I don't know Patrick. I'm not like
Yeah.
a intimate friend of his. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what am I going to write about Patrick? And so what I did was necessity is the mother of invention. I researched the year he was born, things that happened, and man, there were some crazy, amazing things happen, when the year he was born. Dick Tracy was in the comics, and they were doing the Brooklyn Bridge scaffolding, and I think Einstein or something. They were at like college. I mean, but there were some crazy, crazy, crazy big news things. And so I wrote about the year he was born, and then I included at the end a wrap up with his brother and some things that I knew about him. And he wrote a book called Highway 23. Patrick did, and so it made him cry. And I had a picture of him with George. That's my favorite. It's a black and white where he's kind of cradling George's head, and you can see how much they love each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Did you ever meet Kelly Carlin, George's daughter?
no, I did not. She called in once,
Yeah.
but she didn't show up at the studio. Did you read her book?
Yes. That's why I'm trying to get her on the show. I was just trying to get through the publicists and all that. But I would
Oh
love,
yeah.
because she would be another great. She definitely has a lot of her father in her.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard she's a Spitfire too,
Yeah.
I hear. So
Well, I'm sure,
yeah.
like, well, since you were talking about Patrick, I'm sure he talked about his mother, because I know that they got most of their intellect from their mother, because the father was long gone, he disappeared, and the mother was always about like being smart, because he quit school. George quit school, I think, at eighth or ninth grade. He just couldn't take it, but she was always about like spelling, literature, and reading.
Yeah. Yeah. She
That's,
had a big, big influence, and there's no love lost about their father. I guess he was quite brutal
yeah,
with her. So
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, wow. So who are some of the other people that you interviewed? I'm curious.
Well, I was on air with, I mean, he would have what's his name, Robert Thurman on.
Hmm.
He had the head of the Zen Buddhist monastery
Oh,
on up there. There's two monasteries up there, and one of them, the Zen Buddhist one. He would be on pretty regularly. Bunches of authors. He'd have live musicians in the studio. Some Professor Louis and the Chromatics was one of my favorites. He'd be on there. So it was just, and then I just made some friends, there, like uh, somebody who wrote a meditation book became a friend. It was just a nice, fun-filled, kind of ride on the luge during the show, because it was like, okay, next, there'd be like 15, 20 minutes next.
well, I'm not sure if this was the same radio show, but I want to talk about some of your life events that you've had, and two things I wrote down because I thought it was so interesting. Is one, you got to interview a NASA rocket scientist, and
Yep.
another one, you interviewed an Indian film producer, Ishmael Merchant.
Oh yeah.
Was
Yeah.
that from that radio show?
Nope. No, no. Ishmael Merchant and James Ivory lived in Claverack, New York, and I was living in the area. And he'd come out with a cookbook, Ishmael Merchant's Indian Cuisine.
Hmm.
And so Chatham Magazine was a monthly up there, and they asked me to interview him. And so I I got to go to their house, and he served me tea.
Quite the
He was
host.
Yes, he was quite lovely, and it was a cover story. It was a lot of fun. And I remember hearing a story. They had some rental properties there, and there was a cop who was renting with them, and he told me a story that um, Ishmael's nephew was visiting from India. I don't know if he was from India, but he was visiting from out of the area, and he and James Ivory, they were working on, I think it was A Room with a View,
Hmm.
and Anthony Hopkins was at their house. They were working on it, and Ishmael was in the kitchen probably making tea, and his nephew came running in hysterical, Uncle Ishmael, Uncle Ishmael, the man who eats people is in your living room.
Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
That is funny.
Yeah. Yeah. And the NASA rocket scientist is actually one of my freelance accounts is the Gilbert School in Winstead.
Hmm.
I write for their alumni magazine. In fact, I'm working on that now. The new issue is out once a year now. Um, but she was a graduate of Gilbert, and she was there at graduation addressing the seniors. And she was fascinating. It was really great hearing the stories, from her. And I'm listening to her and I'm asking questions like I know what she's talking about, and I really don't. But it's like very weird. This Zen thing happens. This happened to me before. Like one time I was interviewing this consultant for the Norwalk Hour. It was a business story. And, to me, a lot of consultants are just like they sell smoke. I don't know what the hell they do,
Yeah.
you know. So I'm interviewing this consultant and it went on and I wrote the article and everybody was happy. The business editor was happy. The consultant was happy. I couldn't remember one. I read it and it was like I had no attachment whatsoever. It's
Mm.
like I didn't write it. I didn't take it's like while I was in it, I was in the zone, I was zen,
Yep.
and I put it on the page and then poof, it's gone. No attachment whatsoever. And I'm like, I really wrote that? And
That's
it was kind
funny.
of the same way with the rocket scientist, although I had more of a human to human connection with her. I really liked her.
Yeah.
Um, can you have to plug this in? Excuse me a minute. It's running out of juice, I think. It's plugged in? Okay, good. Oh, it came out?
Aha.
Aha, see, technical images. So, but it was fascinating talking to her. But, and I'm in awe of what she does and what she's seen and the advancements and stuff. So yeah, I've gotten to talk to some pretty cool people. And when I was at WAW TV for a year, I I read tarot. I don't do them anymore. I read tarot cards for um, Bob McAllister,
Hmm.
who had the Wonderama show,
Oh yeah, I remember that.
and
Exercise, exercise. Come on, everybody, do the exercise and freeze.
he
I
was
love that
great.
show.
And then Bill Boggs, who had the talk show,
Yep, I remember him too from New York. He
and
was like
I
New York, and he was like on Channel 11 or Channel 5.
Channel 5,
Channel 5.
WNEW, yep,
Yep.
which is now Fox. But I got to interview. I mean, I got to do his tarot cards too. Um, and I'd go down and get to take pictures of because I belong, there. I would take celebrity pictures or get autographs. Like Artie Johnson danced with me, and Martin Mull gave me an autograph that said to Patty with an I, EYE.
Yep.
And I told George C. Scott, I took his picture and I said, and he was wearing like jeans and a blue knit cotton sweater. I said, "Oh, you look like you just got off a sailboat," and he goes, "Do I really?" He was like patting his sweater. I'm like, "Yeah, you do." So,
Well, where'd you
that was
meet
fun.
him? Sorry to
Uh,
interrupt you. Where'd you meet George C. Scott?
on the Bill Boggs show.
Oh,
He was a guest on Bill Boggs.
wow. So you
So,
definitely you definitely mingled with some great people. Another one you mingled with, you met Muhammad Ali. I want to talk about that.
well, he was just a guest on there, and it was like he was the greatest. I am
Yeah.
the greatest, and I just waved at him and said, I mean, it wasn't like we had
Yeah.
any deep conversations or anything. It
He
was
didn't
just
make
kind
tea
of
like Ishmael did he?
no, 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 no. He didn't serve me tea. But he didn't punch me out. So,
Well, that's good. You got to take the wins and losses. That's a good
yeah,
one. No
but
tea,
it
but
was
he didn't
fun.
punch you out.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. And they were at 205 East 67th Street between 2nd and 3rd. I was living in Westport at the time, so I commuted. I was a mole. I'd leave the house when it was dark. I'd get home when it was dark. And I know you could relate to that.
Oh yeah, I
It's a
definitely
reader
could.
does.
Yeah. But it sounds like
Um,
you had I mean, some of the people you've met and some of the things you've done, I wouldn't mind leaving in the dark and coming home in the dark. You had some great experience. Like another one, I'm guessing it might be from the show, or maybe not. You had a chance to goof around with the great Dom DeLuise. Where did you meet him?
oh my God, that was when I was in LA on a talk show for the right side of 40. And they interviewed me and a couple of the women from California. And so Dom DeLuise was a guest on the show. I was on first. He was promoting a new cookbook and he was like cooking in the kitchen and stuff. And then there was another author on, and she wrote a book. I forget what it was called, about boomerang kids, kids who leave home at young adults and then they come back,
Hmm.
as young adults, and how great it is. And oh my God, Dom DeLuise like roasted her.
I can
He was
picture
sitting in
it.
the chair. I mean, he was on the chair when I was talking, and he was very polite and nice and friendly. And he's like, "What are you talking about? The kids leave. You don't want them back." You're like, "Let the door hit them in the butts." And I'm like, "Oh my God, if she had been on first and he did that to her, I would have been like trembling in my boots." And then after the show, we were outside goofing around, having our picture taken, and he danced with me and he was spinning me around, and he was really sweet and really nice.
Well, what I love about him is I love the movies that he used to do with Burt Reynolds, and what was even funnier than the movie were at the end credits, all the bloopers and all the jokes that they would do on each other. I thought that was even better than the movies, just because you could
Yeah,
tell,
good sense of humor.
yeah, you could
Yeah.
tell they were such great friends. They've known each other for years, and they were so much fun, and they weren't making the movies because they wanted the money. They were just making it because they wanted to hang out and have fun, and you could tell he had the great sense
Yeah.
of humor.
And they don't take themselves too seriously. I mean, he was as warm and genuine as you could be. I'm just glad he didn't rip me a new one like he did the other author.
Well, you know what's funny about that is I interviewed Adrienne Barbeau, who was in Cannonball Run, and she actually talked about that. She goes, I was really young at the time. I was a serious actress, and they were goofing around. I was getting so angry because I just wanted to get the scene done, and they wouldn't stop joking around. She goes, I finally realized, later on in my career to mellow out a little bit, but she goes, that was one of my first roles.
Oh
She
my
did one
gosh,
before
yes.
that. Yeah, but
Yeah.
one of her first big movies, and she said she was so angry at first because I just want to film my scene, and they're just going on and on.
Oh my God, how can you get angry at Dom DeLuise? Yeah.
Oh, no, exactly. I don't think she got angry at him. I think she just got angry at the situation because she wasn't used to that. Because if
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
when talking to her, she is so quiet and so humble and so unassuming that she's not used to like these big, loud people, and that's what they were. That's what she
That's
just couldn't
so
be used to.
much fun. Thank you
Yeah.
for sending me a link to that. Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
That is great.
I'll tell you, out of all the things that I've seen, I'm going to talk about a couple of the other things that are on that list that's on your website. That one thing that said, I got a party with Patty, was that you
Oh,
flounced around Martin Van Buren's mansion wearing a hoop skirt.
oh yeah, I know what it's like to wear a hoop skirt, and I wonder how the heck they went to the bathroom. Um, but it was, yeah, Martin Van Buren's estate, Lindenwald, is in Kinderhook, and I live near there. In fact, my former Maltese, before he passed, he was like the mascot there because I'd walk him there all the time. And they were doing a Christmas candle lit thing where they were doing free tours and people come through and get to see the house all decorated. It was this big
Mhm.
mansion, all decorated. And so I was involved with the local theater company, and so they had some of us come and play roles and get some real genuine outfits. And so I was Martin Van Buren's daughter-in-law. So I got to, introduce people to the sitting room or whatever it was. And I'm in this thing, it's like gong, ga, gong, ga, gong. It's like the hoop skirts are really like a bell. And it
Yeah,
was fun. It was great.
yeah. You like to have fun. I can tell. I like that
Yeah.
about you.
Yeah, it's something different. What'd you do? I ran around in a hoop skirt, up
Exactly.
and down the stairs, It was like, when else do you get to do that?
Exactly. So you make the most out of the situation. Carpe diem.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta.
You're like the beat Dead Poet Society.
Why not? I'll meet you in a cave and do some readings.
Well, since we're on this list, you worked with some baseball Hall of Famers. Who were
Oh
they?
yeah.
What'd you do?
I was working for a company named Comb Incorporated, which is in White Plains when I was upstate New York. And I was assisting working with their PR director there. And they have Comb Incorporated. She goes, if it's gray, if it smells, if it itches, we have the cure. They made Clearasil. They invented Clearasil and Just for Men hair color
Hmm.
and Vagisil ointment in cream for women and Sebond denture, adhesive and scratch X flea stuff. I even went to the the doggy dinner after the big whatever it is, the dog show in New York.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, yeah, so we did some events in Cooperstown at the Hall of Fame,
Hmm.
and with ball players, using the original pigskin baseballs that were like stitched together. And the Hall of Famer was Raleigh Fingers with
Ah,
the handlebar mustache.
I remember him.
He was like a spokesperson,
Yep.
and so he was, he was a part of it. And then one year we did something at Mickey Mantle's, and I met Bobby Valentine was
Hmm.
there. And oh my God, who was the announcer everybody knew? I'm trying to think of his name. Fran Healy? Is that
For
his name?
for which team?
I think the Yankees, the one of the
I
announcers.
know Phil Rizzuto was the big
No,
one.
it wasn't Phil Rizzuto. It was somebody else, Fran, somebody. But it was like, it was like by Central Park at Mickey Mantle. So it was kind of,
Yeah.
it was kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, this whole interview is about you having fun. I love it.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. It's, yeah, you gotta make the most because, life, you gotta look on the bright side, like Monty Python says.
Yep.
There's enough things to get, there's enough things that happen in our lives that, you don't want to, you have to react to them and be real, but you don't want them to turn you bitter or beat you down.
Exactly. And so glad that nothing has beaten you down yet, and it
So,
won't.
and it won't if I have anything to say about it,
Exactly.
not that there's not issues and loss, and for sure. And some of that comes out in the poetry.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It seems
But
like poetry is very cathartic and therapeutic for you.
yeah, yeah, it is.
So,
It definitely is. And like I said, it's like, read my gut. Here's my guts. What do you think? And I told you previously, the first, I don't know, did you hear Woman in My Belly on the CD?
it was on this. Yeah, I listened to the whole CD. Which one is it?
Women in My Belly, the Woman in My Belly. I
Oh,
think it's
yes, yes, I do remember that one now.
yeah, that was written because it was before my first public reading, and I got hysterical the night before. I was so scared.
Oh
And
man.
then, yeah, yeah. And so it was like I was giving birth to when I was crying and heaving, it was like I was giving birth to myself. A different part of me was coming out. So and now you can't shut me up.
Well, you know what's funny is like there's so many parallels with you and I, like the interviews, doing writing, and another parallel is that when I was very young, I don't know why, but I was extremely shy, and the only time I was not shy was when I would write stories and read them to the front of the class, and then that's when my teacher was trying to get me to become more communicative with the students and more out of my shell. So she enrolled me in creative writing.
Aw,
But for some reason, I have no idea why I was so shy. But like, it's funny. It's like when I wrote, that's where I expressed all my feelings, and I didn't mind talking about that. But then, like, if I try to have a conversation with somebody, and I don't know what happened, but as soon as I hit 12th grade, I haven't shut the fuck up since.
that's great. It comes naturally. Cause you know why? Because I think you're inquisitive.
Yes, that is very true. I'm interested in anything and everything. If there could be a back of a matchbox, I will read it, see if there's something on there. It's just I love, and that's why I love this show. Out of all things I've done, I think I love this show the best because I meet so many interesting people with so many life stories, and I learn so much from what they've done and what they've been through, and
Yep.
it's great.
Yep. And I had similar experience when I did the right side of 40 and I did all those interviews. The women had to fill out a very intensive, it wasn't just like, where'd you grow up? Are you married? You have kids? No, 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 no. It was like more gutsy than that.
Yeah,
Um, and they had to fill out a very intensive questionnaire. And I had a few of them say that it changed their lives. It made them go inside and really, really think. And they honored me by exposing themselves and talking about all these non-surface things. And I was so humbled by it. And like you, it's like, wow, people are in, even the person behind you in the grocery store has a story.
oh yeah,
Everybody has a story. It's just that we don't always have a chance to engage like that or hear. It's not how society is right now.
yeah,
We're all like in passing kind of. And I think people want to be heard.
yeah.
And it's great you give them an opportunity to.
Yeah, no, as I mentioned off the air, I said I've had interviews that started at 35 minutes all the way up to 5 hours. The interviews last whenever we have nothing else to talk about, and most of the time, people have plenty to talk about, and I want to hear it all. There's so much,
Yeah, I can
there's so
tell
much
you're
destiny.
just like so present and enthusiastic. It's like, so what makes you tick? Wow, you're great.
Well, it's funny you mentioned communications because I speak to a lot of teachers and they tell me that they've actually had to reintroduce how to communicate because kids now with their phones they really have difficulty communicating with each other. They don't know how to talk to each other without having that phone in their hand. More like, let me text my friend while the other person's doing this when they could have a person right next to them and they don't know how to talk to them.
I know it's very isolating, and I think it's unfortunate. I think there's some movement to keep phones out of schools.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very good thing because, kids are going to not have social skills and they're not going to know how to relate person to person. It's all going to be, emojis and little sound bitey things.
No, exactly. That's why I'm 56, and I said I'm glad I'm at least the age I am because I got a chance to be young in the 70s before there were cell phones, before there were video games, and I was outside all the time, and for fun, I hung out with my friends and played games outside instead of just like being in my room all day on my phone playing video games. I just am so glad that I didn't grow up as a kid now.
And the pandemic did not help.
Yeah, most definitely.
The
That made it
pandemic
even
did
worse.
not help. Yeah,
Yeah.
because everybody was super duper isolated. And I know my goddaughter had her youngest who just turned 5.
Hmm.
This month we went to a party 2 weeks ago for her. She was a pandemic baby. My
Uh,
goddaughter had her in the hospital, and I'm like, okay, you had her, now get the hell out. Because that day she left was when things shut down. And the first year of Gwenny's life, she was never outside the house,
hmm.
didn't see anybody but family, didn't go to the grocery store, didn't go out in the car, didn't do, and it impacted her for when things started to open up. It was like uh, out of her realm of experience, and so it would made her scared or nervous or anxious, and now she's the belle of the ball and she's adorable.
Yeah.
But that transition from total and complete isolation and not being socialized was, you don't think about it, but for the kids in school certainly, but also for babies,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, you see that a lot more now because when you think like when you're young, you're carefree, you don't care give a shit about anything. Now it seems like the kids that age are the most depressed, most anxious, most on medication. It just seems like it's the exact opposite. Where like an example would be, let's go back to George Carlin, where he said like when he started off with the suit and tie and his humor was really straight laced, and he goes, you know what? I want to be a little bit more irreverent, and I want to like go out there and I want to grow my hair long. I'm going to go to colleges where I can say things that normally I couldn't say to anywhere else. Now it's just the opposite. The comedians are like, I don't want to go to colleges. They're way too uptight. They're like canceling me for everything. So it's just usually done a
Wow.
complete 180. Where back then, yeah, let's go to the young kids because they're the ones that can understand me and they're the ones that are like radical and they want change. Now it's the opposite. We're like, what are you doing? You can't say that. That's offensive.
Right, right. It's the pendulum.
Yeah. Yep.
It's going to swing again, but
Yeah.
uh it's a phase, unfortunately.
Well, somebody brought up a great point, and I agree with this. They said like right now, life is the best it's ever been, and they said like kids are almost like they're looking for something to rebel because their life is so safe, so boring that they need something to rebel against. Like in the '60s, you had women's rights, you had civil rights, you had this and that. I mean, every decade has their own issues, but now kids are like, what? What can I do? What am I angry about? And they're angry about these things that nobody, for the most part, in my opinion, really gives cares less about.
Wow, yeah.
So I
Yeah,
think,
it's every generation has its, has its cross to bear, so to speak, has to find itself, I think.
yeah, exactly. Yep. Well, speaking of crosses you had to bear, I might pronounce this name or this word incorrectly, and you can correct me. I think it's called Takotsubo. It was the octopus.
Takatsubo.
All right, it's called. It's about the octopus trap in Japanese. Broken Heart Syndrome. Is that was a poem I read of yours? Is that based on truth?
Yes.
Okay, well,
It's
let's talk about that.
absolutely based on truth. Takotsubo is stress-induced cardiomyopathy,
Hmm.
not a heart attack, but stress-induced. It affects every chamber of the heart, which is why it's called Takotsubo, because an octopus trap has lots of different chambers in it. And it's also known as broken heart syndrome.
Hmm.
It was studied by Johns Hopkins. In fact, I need to write about it because a lot of women don't know about it. It affects men can get it, but it affects mainly women. It has to do with the stress hormones and so forth. And it's it's scary, it's scary because you can't see your heart. You can't see what's going on. You can't, you just know you're feeling this. It's like, well, what's going on? And is it going to get better? And how did this happen? And how can I get over on this kind of thing? It's but it's very genuine. And mine was caused by cumulative stresses, that all kind of piled up. Um, I've had it twice actually. Um, I had it 2 years ago, and I had it, when I wrote the poem. Um, so I gotta learn to meditate more. And so anyway, but it's nothing to screw around with. But my cardiologist, who's in Rhinebeck, I happen to be in upstate New York, and had the best of care because they sent me from Northern Dutchess and Rhinebeck to Vassar Brothers in Poughkeepsie, which is renowned for their heart center.
Hmm.
Um, but he said that he's had women experience it who one of them had escaped from a burning building, and another one almost drowned whitewater rafting. So it can be a big bang of a stress, or it can be the cumulative, cumulative ones, which is what I experienced.
Wow. And so, when you had the experience, you thought you were having a heart attack and you were rushed to the hospital, or you weren't sure what it was?
No, actually, it was kind of weirdly magical, mystical, because I woke up with it, and it doesn't feel like, I mean, men, first of all, women and men have experienced heart attack, have different symptoms. And this is not a heart attack, so it's even different from that.
Yeah.
I woke up one morning with a pain that went from the center of my chest to my back.
Oof.
And I thought I had actually been moving furniture the night before. And so I tweaked a muscle, moving furniture, had a muscle pull. And I went to work. I was working for a homeopathic company at the time, and the owner was very knowledgeable about, medicine and health. And I said, gee, I have this feeling. I don't know, I pulled a muscle. I'm not sure. And he's like, oh, I've done that before. So I know my body really well. I'm pretty much in touch with it. I'm very much in touch with it. And I went for a walk at lunch. No, I'm not short of breath. No, I don't have a pain down my arm.
Hmm.
No, I don't, it's just this pain in the middle of my chest.
Hmm.
And so it was December, and I was leaving work, and it was a dark and stormy night. And I went over the Kingston Rhine Cliff Bridge. It was a 45-minute drive back to West Saugerties, Woodstock. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll stop it. I'll go to my Zumba class and see how I feel after Zumba. I knew something was up, but I wasn't sure what. So I'm on my way to Zumba, and this was definitely fate. There was an accident, fender bender, so I couldn't get to my Zumba class on time. And you don't want to go to Zumba class 10 minutes, 15 minutes late.
Yeah.
And I was passing a walk-in clinic, an urgent care clinic. And I swear to God, it was my father was a police lieutenant, and every once in a while, I think he intervenes. And I felt like my steering wheel was like pulled, like, all right, let's get it checked out. Boom.
Yeah.
So I went into the clinic, and I told the PA on duty what was going on. I said, I think I might have pulled a muscle, but I don't know. And she goes, yeah, it sounds like you did, but let me do an EKG. And then she came back and she said, let me do another EKG. And
Okay.
she said, your EKG is a little off. And she goes, I think you should, go to the hospital. I worked at I was actually near Northern Dutchess. I used to work at Northern Dutchess in the PR department. She goes, I think you should be checked out at the emergency room. And I said, really? Can I go home and feed my dog? And she's like, how far away do you live? I said, 15 minutes. She goes, yeah. No, you better go to the hospital. So I'm like, okay, she's not calling the Mounties or calling an ambulance, must be fine. So I drove myself back over the Kingston Rhinecliff Bridge to the hospital. And the Dr. Wolf was a wonderful female doctor who was on duty. And she goes, yeah, you're not in the risk category. You don't have diabetes. You're not overweight. You don't smoke. Um, but she did the EKG and it was wonky. And so she sent it to Vassar Brothers and they said, get her in an ambulance up here now.
Whoa.
And so that's how it happened. That's how it happened. Yeah.
So that was the first one. When you had the second one 2 years ago, did you already know what it was?
Oh yeah. It was, believe it or not, it was right after a poetry reading. I was doing a poetry reading in Winstead at the new bookstore, The Curious Cat.
I love that place.
Yeah, it's great. She's wonderful. Stacy's great. So, and some of our poetry friend Debbie was there, and some of the other people were there. And we got up to leave, and I had that feeling. I'm like, uh-oh.
Here we go again.
So I didn't want to alarm Jack. So we're driving, and I'm like, let's stop at the Mill House and have a glass of wine. I want to see if that helps. So we stopped, and the feeling did not go away. And so I'm like, okay. And then I was debating, do I want to go home and drive myself to the ER? Or do I want Jack to take me to the ER? Because I don't want to alarm him. So we're driving, and I said, please, don't worry, just relax. I said, would you mind driving me to the hospital? And so we did, and they checked me out, and they sent me by ambulance up to Hartford.
You really suffer for your art, don't you?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. And it's not on, I mean, you can usually you recover, and it can obviously happen more than once. So yeah, I want to let women know about this event. So it's kind of, it's kind of crazy when it happens.
Yeah. Until I read that poem, I have never heard of that. So that was very interesting.
Well, they say, Debbie Reynolds, after Carrie Fisher died,
Yes.
she died a couple days later, and they said she died of a broken heart.
Yep.
And I'm like, I bet you anything she had Takotsubo.
I see that a lot. I'm going to give you a perfect example of this. I have a friend whose first his father died of a heart attack. Then his mother, not too long after that, had a heart attack. While this was going on, his sister went missing. So he was here. I swear to God, I even said, even the Kennedys are saying, "Man, I feel sorry for you."
Oh my God.
So when the sister was missing, the mother was on ICU after the father died. He was. They were looking for her. They found out it was a drug deal gone bad. They found the sister. She was killed.
Oh.
And it's no lie. He said when the cop was on the phone and said, "We found your sister," the mother flatlined right at that moment. So they had a funeral.
Oh my God.
Almost like the mother was waiting to find out what happened to her daughter.
Whoa.
Yep. So it's just, I said, I cannot believe everything your family has been through. Then it goes even worse where his other sister became an alcoholic. It was just, I feel so bad. The nicest family in the world. It's just that they've been through so much, but it was weird that what you just said describes their situation so perfectly. Like father died, the mother had a heart attack. She went to ICU. Then the daughter was missing. She waited until she found out what happened with the daughter. Then she flatlined.
Whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. That is crazy horrible.
Yeah, that's Takotsubo.
Yeah. Takotsubo land for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Wow.
So,
Wow. Well, I think more people need to know about it. I'm thinking of a couple of avenues of where to share it, but I haven't pitched it yet. But it's on my to-do list to spread the word, because it's nothing to mess with. It is your heart, and it's something you can heal from, but you need the proper treatment. I mean, I'm still on a heart support medication from it. So it's, even though I'm recovered, and I even said I love my cardiologist. He's a wise guy. We get along really well. And I have to tell you the story. And I said, okay, well, what is this doing? What am I on this for? And he goes, it's keeping you alive. I'm like, okay, good answer. Good. Okay,
don't
got
need to
it.
know anything else.
Yep. But when I was in the hospital the first time at Vassar, my sister came. She was living in Fairfield at the time, and she's an RN. And as my mother was, and she had experience, and she's been all over, and that they trained them everywhere, but she had been in cardiac care. And when she was talking to the head of cardiology at Vassar, it was like they were talking a foreign language. It was like they were talking Japanese. It's
Yeah.
like, what? And my sister told me later, your heart capacity dropped to blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, I'm glad I didn't know, at the time. But anyway, I'm in the hospital. My sisters and hers were there, and she really liked the head of cardiology, and I did too. I had confidence, and if she liked him, it was okay, because she's, rough critic of the, she knows medicine.
Yeah.
And so, so I was there, and I'm like, I'd been in the hospital. I think I was in 5 days, and I was in 3 days. And I said, can I please take a shower? I feel really gross. I need to take a shower. Is it okay if I take a shower? And he said, well, okay, but a nurse will want to watch you. And I said, I charge more for that. And, and it's interesting. My sister, of course, was there, was seeing it, but the guy busted up laughing. You gotta laugh. I mean, you gotta.
Oh, exactly. Well, I mean, for people who don't know, I have cerebral palsy, and when I was doing stand-up comedy, it's like I love self-deprecating humor. I love humor in general. So I mean, I don't think that I can never find anything offensive. I think you can always find something funny in everything. So I'm just like you. You take the worst things in life and you just can make it funny, and it just
Yeah,
makes you feel so much better. It's like instead of taking everything so seriously, like, oh my God, I have this affliction or this is happening, just make a joke out of it. Have
yeah,
fun.
yeah. It's not gonna change anything if I mean, of course you're scared and you're nervous, but
Yeah, exactly.
you gotta kind of,
Yeah.
go with it in a way.
Yep, and I've always been like that ever since I was a young kid. Just make it like I just love having a sense of humor, and there was nothing that could, like I said, with the cerebral palsy, that was like most of my act, and so it was so funny because people in the beginning were like, "Oh, I don't know if I can laugh." Like, I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm a stand-up comedian. You can laugh at. So then I had to turn it around instead of like trying to make people instead of people going. Oh, I said no. So I talked about like how much I loved having cerebral palsy. I was like, you know what? I want to get an operation on this hand. Now I don't want to make this hand like I want to make this hand, the good hand, more like the bad hand. This thing is a party favorite. Yeah. I talked
Okay.
about how much I love this hand.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, yeah.
Well, the
And I
funniest
think it's that cathartic thing we're talking about. That's kind of like the poetry. It's like cathartic, like put it out there, put it out there.
the funniest thing ever happened to me was like, well, because I didn't realize I used to hold the mic in my right hand, and people didn't realize like I didn't realize you were handicapped. So then drunk people come up to me after the show, and this happened to me at least 4 or 5 times. Are you really handicapped? That's my impression of a drunk person.
Oh my.
So, not the best impression, but so then somebody,
Oh, it's good. It's good. I get it. Yeah.
a comedian, another comedian's like, "No, man, he's just fucking with you. If you were really handicapped, you'd be the funniest fucking person here." And then they'd walk away. It's like they really think I'm kidding. They have no idea. They thought I was just faking the whole cerebral palsy just for the set.
Oh my God, it was a gag. No, no,
Yeah.
no, it's for real.
Yeah, so that happened like I don't know how many times people come to you. Are you really handicapped? I didn't notice. So they never could tell. And I love messing with people.
Whoa,
That was fun.
whoa. Well, can I read my heart poem?
Oh, please do.
Yeah, this so people will know this is one of the ways that you can deal with things and put it out there. Thank you. It's called How do I trust the heart again? It has turned on me in a most unexpected way, one that sent me strapped into an ambulance to a place with curtains and machines and needles, a place with men and women wearing white coats, carrying clipboards, wheeling computers, using strange apparatuses, a place of beeps and charts and graphs, a place of no sleep, where I can hear the squish, squish, squishing sound of liquid life coursing through my body as I watch the jagged green pattern dancing across the monitor, wondering what the steps mean. How do I trust my heart again when there was no warning and the pain wasn't so awful, but an urgency imposed? Me with no preparation, not even a toothbrush, stripped and wearing the standard, barely modest garb, such an ugly and odd uniform, really. But there I am, all wired up, right smack dab in the middle of the hustle and bustle, commenting that drugs can be your friend as I am wheeled off for a procedure I cannot even begin to wrap my head around before dawn has broken. And just in case they need access, they have shaved my private sacred mound, the slice of hair and hairlessness perfectly symmetrical, like yin and yang without the yang. And I notice it resembles one of those bakery black and white cookies, which amuses me, but not really. After much testing and retesting, after my heart has faded to 35% working order, they tell me that I am not in a risk category, that I do not fit a profile, and that I am experiencing, in a word, takotsubo, which means octopus trap in Japanese, and is a condition also known as broken heart syndrome, a condition that women experience due to stress.
Mhm.
I understand. I know about broken hearts. I know about relationships that disappoint and prove to be unworthy. I've paid the emotional price more times than I care to remember. So after all this, how do I trust the heart again? Dare I trust my heart again? I thought not until I experienced Takotsubo and a man stepped forward, awakening love, opening my heart so I could move on.
I love it.
Thank you.
You know what makes your poetry so great too is reading it on the paper is powerful, but then when you actually present it, I've seen you present your poetry so many times in open mics and even at the Goddess Festival the other day, last week or week before, and it's just your presentation is, as I said in the intro, whoever said that, powerful, powerful, and that's why I
Thank
love
you.
this CD with the music with your spoken word is such a great combination. And it reminded me, I was telling you off the air, and I said, very recently I started getting into Patti Smith again.
Yeah.
And I said, your stuff reminds me of that because the music with the spoken word is great combination. And I would love for you to do like even if you don't do it with music, just Audible, where like put all your books on and you read your poetry because it just brings that and enhances it and it brings that added element to it.
Thank you. And Gus and I are actually talking about at some point doing another, series of recordings, which would be great fun, actually.
Yeah.
But we call our work, we used to perform, all over the Ulster County, upstate New York and stuff. And he he'd say that we have no age music and we perform to the throng of the precious few. So thank you for being in that category. I
Yes.
really
No, you
appreciate
got
it.
it. Another example of this is Jim Morrison from The Doors came out with poetry and he called it an American prayer. But what happened was after he died, the rest of the band took music and put it to his words, and I have listened to that I don't know how many times. I've listened to it without the music, and it's great, but with the music, it just brings a whole new life to it.
Yeah. 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 It's really funny too. When we were making the CD, it was really magical. And he had his work cut out. I mean, he liked my voice and stuff, but he had his work cut out for me because I don't read music. And he'd be okay on the third beat of the fourth measure. I'd be like, what's a
What?
measure?
Sounds like me. It's like, okay, just go like this when you
Yeah.
want me to talk. Point to
But
me.
he taught me. And what was interesting is that some of those compositions he had, that some were written especially for the poems, but some were pre-existing instrumentals. And he
Yeah.
plays everything. He plays alto, no, soprano, saxophone, keyboard, piano, synthesizer, keyboard. And then my favorite instrument is called it's a wind synthesizer called a MIDI, which is what he's holding on the cover. And it can sound like anything from a shakuhachi Japanese flute to an oboe to an alien invasion. And so anyway, what was cool is we were going through some of his stuff, and I have a poem called, what the heck's the name of it? Ah, The Last Embrace.
Okay.
And it's a musing on death and dying.
Hmm.
And we were going through his, and that's on the CD, of course you heard it. And
Yeah.
what's interesting, that was one that just kind of came to me like automatic writing. Um, but what's interesting is we're listening to his music, and I said, I like that, I like that piece with it. And it was called something like Dawn of the Dead or Day of the Dead. I mean, it was like so freaky. I mean, he named it. It was, yeah.
Yeah. How did this collaboration come about? Did he hear you and said, you know what? I think it would be a great way to put my music with your words?
He was one of the ones that got me out of the poetry closet.
Hmm.
He was one of the resident musicians on the Woodstock Roundtable talk show. And so they were somewhat familiar with, with me, but I wasn't performing at all. And there was a street fair in Kingston that they were at, and I had my little dog Charlie, the Maltese. Now I have Bobert, who's behind me, and I they made me read a poem at the street fair. They handed me a mic, and I'm holding my dog, and I read a poem called Martin Van Buren's Estate.
Hmm.
Lindenwald, which we talked about Martin Van Buren. And it was basically about my dog taking a leak at Martin Van Buren's. I'm on the street. so that so it's very appropriate. So
Yeah.
that so then I got a gig through Gus at a place in Wyndham called the Blue Pearl, which was a shop, tea room, restaurant, art studio owned by a woman. She's passed away, but Ulla Darney, who
Hmm.
was an actress from, I think she was from Sweden or Denmark, and she dated Gary Cooper, and she was
Wow.
known for painting. She was known for these amazing lights, which are really expensive. They're not stained glass, but they're built like a stained glass globe, and she would paint the underside. And she would hold art events, and salons and things. So I read my first gig was at the Blue Pearl with Gus, and that was the one I got hysterical about ahead of time with the woman in my belly.
Nah. There's
So,
there's two that really stood out to me, and it was I Lie Still and The Face of God. I love those two.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That one, Gus had written that, and he wanted to do something called The Face of God, and so I researched all these spiritual quotes, and I love that too. It's like dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
It's really, yeah. That was fun. That was a research project. I had to look up spiritual, I mean, I love it anyway. I love studying it, but I had to look up all these quotes from different spiritual masters and Albert Einstein, of course, because he had one foot in there, and, very much so.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
What was that?
do you want me to read I Lie Still?
I would love that.
Okay. That was the one that was written. Um, I think I told you offline. I don't think I told you online. Um, I wrote I Lie Still um, in response to 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
Where the heck is it? Here it is. 71. Because I took my little dog out after, the next day or two, and I just felt like inside of me was all shattered and fragmented in my heart, like broken up into jaggedy puzzle pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh my God, I feel like Pablo Picasso after the blue period. I felt like Pablo Picasso, you know, was inside me and messed with my innards.
Yeah.
And so this came out. This was one that just once I started, it just kind of spewed out of me. I lie still. Pablo Picasso invaded my interior scape. I have been disfigured, displaced eyes, fragmented breasts, chest torn asunder, heart breast open, ready to burst, feelings fractured, refracted like a shattered mirror. When did Salvador Dali take his brush to my eye sockets, stroking them into salty, dripping rivets, then placing the face of the watch into my mouth, elongating the seconds, extending my pain? Jackson Pollock spewed emotions up and down my spine, haphazard attack, the paint still wet, finger painted anxiety smeared upon my belly. How brittle am I? Oh, how brittle am I? I lie still, tremble, holding my breath, waiting for Michelangelo to rescue me, waiting for Michelangelo to rescue me, caress me, coax me out from the stone before I shatter. I might shatter.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's a,
It's funny. I read that. I might have recited it. I recited it at the John Nolte Gallery when he first opened.
mm-hmm.
He had a platform in the studio during this open house that said, speak your truth or speak your mind or something.
Yeah.
And so I was challenged to do so. So I got up there and did that poem, and it kind of blew him away. And then some woman came in who lived in New York, and he said, you have to tell her that poem. You have to tell her that poem. So I actually whispered the poem to her in the middle of this gallery opening. I leaned into her ear and whispered to her. She started crying.
Wow. And people sometimes you don't realize how powerful words can be.
Well, when you touch someone, that's the ultimate as an artist. That is the ultimate. I mean, not that I want everybody to cry when they hear my stuff. I mean, but please don't cry at that one. I didn't mean that one. It's supposed to be,
You know?
but it's, but that's really the ultimate is when you can move somebody or touch somebody, and speak to, and that's the cathartic thing that, we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Wow. And that definitely is one of my favorites. I listened to that I don't know how many different times going back and forth. I kept on hitting repeat, repeat. I loved it because it was the words are so powerful as we mentioned, but then along with the music, it made it even that much better.
Well, you're going to have to do a duet with me. That's all there is to it.
You know what? It's already done, and we have it on video right now, so I can't back out of it. And
Yes,
second thing is I don't want to back out of it. I'm definitely looking forward to doing this.
you're on.
We have
All
to
right.
do it. Is there ever going to be a second collaboration with Gus?
I hope so. We've been, we kind of tentatively talk around it and mention, I would really love to, and I know he would love to. It's just a matter of, waiting for good weather and making it, setting the time aside to make it happen, which I will make a point of doing. And I think
Okay.
he will too. And after this, I have to tell him, I'm like, we got to do this.
That's like me too. Is the one thing I cannot stand is procrastination. Whenever I say I'm going to do something, it's like, no, let's do it because sometimes you know how life gets in the way, and there's so many other things that come up. It's like, nope, we got to do it. We're going to make it. That's why right now I'm saying it. You and I are doing a duet, and we're going to make it happen very soon.
All right, you're on. You are on.
And
And
you mentioned the New Alki Gallery. I think that might have been not that particular moment, but I think that's the first place I ever met you because Jack and I are part of something called Nutmeg Junction. We did a live version of the audio where it's on radio. And
and you
you,
were wearing an orange jumpsuit and you were freaking hysterical.
that was me. That was
Yeah.
the time. So was that the place? Was that New Alki Gallery where we did that?
Yeah, I had my when I moved here, I couldn't find creative community like in Woodstock. So I'm like Mickey Rooney, let's have a show, you know. And
Yep.
so I started the spoken word open mic, and I started at the Hub,
Yeah,
which is no
Performance Hub.
longer.
I love that place. I did comedy there. For people who don't know,
Oh,
people who are in Connecticut. It was called now it's an Asian restaurant, which I love that place too. But before that, it was called Performance Hub, owned by Jay Roberts. I'm friends with him.
that's he had it when I started the open mic, and unfortunately then it closed, and so John wanted me to do it, and so
Yeah,
and I said I already committed to Jay. And so when the Hub closed, I went to John. I said, "You still want to do it?" And he
yeah,
said, "Yeah." So it was at John's until the pan. I went for 3 years actually,
yeah,
literally 3 years until the pandemic.
yeah. Unfortunately, I killed a lot of things. I know he owns the bookstore now. It's
Yeah, Howard's.
Howard's. Does he have an open? I know you don't do a speakeasy anymore. Does he do anything like that at the bookstore?
I think on is it Wednesdays?
Wednesdays.
I think Wednesdays from 6 to 7. I haven't been, but I think Wednesdays from 6 to 7 he has like a writing time, and then
Okay.
from 7 on there's an open mic.
Yeah. So I know they also have a drum circle with I've had them on this show as well. They're great.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah. They've been to the church, the Episcopal church where Eric and you were, had some activity too.
Yeah. There was
Yep.
for people who don't know, there was an open mic in Torrington, and I got a chance to guest host it several times. And you and Jack were both at the time I hosted it, and I had the best time. It was so much fun. Actually, it's funny because so many people said, "When are you coming back? When are you coming back?" I said, "I would love to do it every week if I could, or I think it was once a month." And but the person that hosted was Eric Kahn and Conrad Sinkowitz. So they said,
Conrad.
yeah, and they said whenever I'm not around, and there's a couple times where Conrad's like, I just don't feel like doing it tonight. Rich, what are you doing? And I would host it as much as I could. I loved it.
Yeah, you were great. It was fun. Yeah.
That's what I just loved about it because like I got a chance because as I mentioned, I did comedy, motivational speaking, and with this, I just had to get up there and have to like try and be funny all the time. I could just talk about people, have fun. I met so many great people, and I've had a couple of them on the show already because it seemed like they had like a lot of the same group of people that would come every month, and they would have all these new things that they were doing. It was fun.
And musicians and drumming and poetry and yeah,
Yeah, it was
singing. Yeah.
very eclectic mix of so many talented people, and I love that. Unfortunately, that ended. I guess they didn't have the funding anymore, but
Right.
there's a couple new ones that are opening up, which hopefully that these people will become a part of again. I think in Bristol.
Yeah. Where do you promote your comedy and your other events?
Basically, I wish I could find more places. Like I do a lot of it through social media, like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. So I do that. But if you know any other, I have a website which I really don't use as much. But if you can think of some other places where I can promote, 'cause I have so many different things that I want people to find out about, and that's the hardest part. It's like I always tell people, getting the content finished, that's one thing. Actually getting people to know where to find it, read it, listen to it, that's a whole other animal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I will check it out, and if I have any ideas, I will certainly let you know. And I'd like to, I mean, I'm already friends with you, but I'd like to follow you.
Oh, please. Yeah. Well, for remote right now, do follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Those are the two biggest things where I promote. And now somebody just introduced me to something called Blue Sky, I think it's called. I'm not
Oh,
really familiar with that. I
Blue Sky.
think it's Blue Sky.
Yeah, I think it's
Strava.
huh? Okay, I think it's competition for what used to be Twitter and is now X.
Okay, so that's what somebody introduced. So I have an account on there, but I really haven't used it 'cause I'm trying to become more acclimated with that. And with technology is not my friend. So
Me too. It's like a freaking black hole.
yeah, exactly. So,
It's like, whoosh, and all of a sudden you're like, what happened to my life? I'm stuck on the computer. But I think I have an Instagram account, but you have to do it through your phone, I think.
yeah, well, I
And
do.
I don't really do it through my phone because my phone is old and not friendly to read. You know, it's like tiny mouse print and it annoys me.
You mean the flip top doesn't work anymore?
Oh no, I'm a little beyond that, but I'm an I8 and it's like it's still small. And my sister like is I mean, I text on it obviously.
Yeah,
We've texted. Um, and I call on it.
yeah.
But I don't do anything graphic. I don't surf the internet. I don't do, and my sister's always sending me links to stuff. I'm like, I'm not gonna go there. Don't send it to my phone. I can't see it. you know?
Well, my i7 has the same issue, so I
Oh, you
understand.
have a 7. Okay. I'm better than you. I'm ahead of you. But you know what's funny? I went to Verizon. I had some questions or whatever for them. And I was talking to him about my phone and I said, I don't know, I like it, it's not broke. Da, da, da. And he looked at my plan and he said, your phone's fine for what you use. I
Yeah,
mean, he was like an anti-salesman. He's like, you don't need any, and I respect that. I trust him. He goes, you're grandfathered into this plan. Don't change it. You could never get that back again.
that's funny because they said the same thing about me too. They're like, this plan does not even exist anymore. I work with AT&T, and they said, wow, your grandfather in, they don't even offer this and stick with
Yep.
it. And I said, yeah, for the things I like. I mean, I like to post different things of what I'm doing. Like right now, especially when this comes out, I'll be promoting the hell out of it, posting it on different sites on Facebook and.
And I will too. Send me whatever links and I'll do the same thing
All right, good,
because,
yeah.
I can get out there and promote myself when I pretend it's not me.
Well, that's what I love about people like you because when I interview all these people, and an example when I was doing comedy, I'd have all these I would produce my own shows and have different comedians on my show do benefits, and these comedians wouldn't even promote themselves, so you can't even tell your friends to come. So I love when guests like you say, you know what, give it to me. I'm going to let everybody know instead of just doing the show and completely forgetting about it and letting me worry about it because I want as many people to see this as possible. So I love the
Well, I
fact
pre
that
I pre-promoted it and tagged you. That I know how to do.
all right, well, good. I'm glad.
I pre-promoted and I tagged you. And my sister teases me. She goes, "Oh, you and your 3,500 friends. Do you know them all?" I'm like, "Duh, I know."
Well, the same thing with me with my 4,992 friends. I think I maybe know three of them.
Right? Yeah, yeah. Well, you know me now, so that's
Exactly. So I know four
four.
and five counting Jack. So,
Yeah. But it suits the purpose. And I mean, if you use Instagram, you do it on your little
yeah,
i7.
I
Okay.
do it on my
So,
i7. It's kind of tough, but I get it done.
okay. All right. I'll have to learn how to do it because I feel like a Neanderthal.
Yeah, you, me both. Well, as I mentioned through the interview, there's a lot of parallels with me and you. We've done radio, books. Another parallel we have is you and I have both done voiceover work, voice acting.
Yep.
Let's talk
Yep.
about that.
Oh, I love voiceover work. I would do more if I could, but yeah, I've done radio spots, and commercials. I've done a little bit of the like I did a Nutmeg Junction
Yeah,
one, which was really fun. I'd love to do more, actually. I would love to do more. And now you can record, you don't have to go to a studio. You can do it if you have like Jack has equipment to do it.
yeah.
I would love to get some more gigs, but unfortunately, not a lot of times, like when I moved here, I approached, the couple of the radio stations, but they don't pay for voiceover work. They have the
Uh,
talent on-air talent doing it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I, in the 90s, I was in radio from 92 to 97, and they were telling me, I think it's funny because back then there's like, oh, you got into radio at the wrong time. It's no fun anymore. Now when I talk to DJs, they're like, oh my God, you were in radio when it was fun. But back then is all these big companies were simulcasting the bigger stations. So you would get the Imuses, the Sterns, and all these different people that that were with that company, and then they would just hire some board tech, and I would have my show on the weekend. But so yeah, I would do voiceovers for like I love movies, and I always know a lot about movies. So the person who owned the station I worked at, WWCO, your hometown favorite, I worked there for a while, and they said, what's this movie about? I would help them write the commercial. Who's in this movie? Like, Rich, why don't you just do it? So I became like the voice of Hoyts at the time.
Oh, that's great.
That was fun. So I did that for a while, but now like everything, I went full circle. I have a real job that pays the bills, but this
Right. Me
the
too.
best hobby in the world, and I get a chance. There's so much freedom in this. I don't have somebody, a boss, could you got to make this a half-hour interview. You got to do this. You can't say that. Now I just hit record and start talking, and I get a chance to do what I wanted to do. Because even when I was doing radio back then, they're like, you're talking a little too much. But I would just like have people on the air like I'm doing now, and just talk to the guests, or not the guests, the listeners. And they're like, Rich, you can't do that all the time. That was my style all the time. So now
What radio station were you with?
I worked at several. I worked at 1240 WWCO. I worked at 990 WNTY in Southington. And the biggest station I worked at, it's now defunct, but it was one of the biggest rock stations in Connecticut, was 106.9 WCCC. I was doing the overnights
And where was that?
in Hartford.
Okay.
Yep. And
Cool.
they got bought out by a Christian station, which I think it still is. But back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was one of the biggest stations in the area.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, so I did that for a long time, and I loved it. But it's just, yeah, now it's, as you mentioned, they don't want to pay anything, because now people, especially money, radio stations, all about advertising. Nobody wants to advertise on something where people can just go on Spotify, iTunes, listen to music on demand whenever they want to. They really don't care about most of the stations. And if you want to, if they like the morning guys, the morning guys usually have a podcast now, so you can listen to the show later on. So
Right.
they're not really paying a lot of money now for anything. So
Now there's things like, I mean, I even think about things that might be relatively boring, but would be fun, which is like recording, hello, you have reached,
yeah,
whatever. I mean, the recording, the phone recordings, and there's also like not PowerPoints, but things like at Community Health and Wellness Center, you have to take these workshop classes online, and they always have people doing voiceovers and things,
Yep.
going through the slide presentations. I mean, I'd love to do that. That's fine.
Well, there's one thing, and Jack can attest to this because he was on a show maybe last week or week before. I'm still part of Nutmeg Junction, and very recently they have something called the Legacy of WAPJ, which is a station in Torrington. And Joe Quirk, a mutual friend of ours, great guy, one of the most creative people I ever met.
Yeah.
Said he interviewed me. He goes, Rich, I love your enthusiasm. I love your passion. We need a show for you. I want you on video. So our good friend Jeff Savage, who unfortunately passed away several years ago, he did a show called Malcolm McDuff Theater Detective. It was a great series. And so he goes, I'm taking over that role. And Jack was part of it last week, but I'm gonna mention a joke. Can you write a part for Patty?
Oh, cool. Fun.
Because he's always asking
With
for
no
ideas.
foreign strange words I can't pronounce because I feel like a buffoon. Has to be
Well,
the known entity words.
Well, no, the good thing is that it's not live, so we can record it. You can you can just say, let me try it again. Let me try it one more time. We can record it over and over again until you get it right. So no worries there.
Okay. All right. Okay. I just don't like to make people cringe.
No, not at all. I think it'll be fun to have you on there. And as you mentioned, with technology now, we record using Zoom. We don't even go into the studio anymore. So we'll do it just like this, and you can record your voice. And then it's amazing how he takes everybody's voices, puts it together with sound effects, all these different things, music. I even told him, I said, I don't know how you do it, but it's amazing. And
he's pretty genius, and I think he doesn't sleep.
That's what I asked him, because I talk about this on other interviews where people know him. I said he has 2 jobs, he has 2 kids, he works all day, all night, edits 3 radio shows, writes 2 radio shows, I know, or 3 now, and now we're going to start filming this. So I don't know where, and that's why I always use him as an example. I said, when people say, I don't have enough time to do this, it's talk to Joe Quirk. You have enough time.
Right.
And just like you too, it's like you have a job and you find time to write your poetry. You have time to do this. Go to different events. If
I try. I don't do as much as I'd like to, but I try.
I know, yeah, you and me both. That's why when people always say, "Oh boy, if I was retired, I wouldn't know what to do." If I was retired, I would still wouldn't have enough time to do everything I want to do. There's so many interests
Exactly.
I have.
I joke, it's like, what's boredom? What is
Exactly.
boredom?
I have not experienced boredom in 56 years.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good thing. That's
I
a good.
know.
So what do you have coming up that you're doing?
The biggest thing is I have the radio show that I'm doing with Joe Quirk, and where I was just at the Phoenix Theater in Oakville last night talking about getting using that theater and the Strand Theater in Seymour. We're gonna start filming some of the skits that we've already recorded for radio,
Oh, cool.
and also
Just
what was that?
just like when you were at Nolke doing
Yes,
crazy
exactly. I'll be
stuff.
jumping around. I'll be jumping around in an orange suit.
Like that. Yeah, that works.
And then another
Performance
thing.
art to the max.
What was that?
Performance art to the max.
Exactly. And the another thing I'm doing is a friend of mine. And I love how everything sort of just fell right into place. When I started doing this show at the radio station, and I can only record at the radio station. And my last guest was John Bristol, who owns Elmwood Productions. He makes movies with puppets, but he makes comedies, dramas, horror movies, and he's won awards. He went to California, won a bunch of awards. His movies have been at festivals. So right now he asked me. I've hosted several of his movies. But he wants me to write his next one. So I'm starting
Oh,
to write one
wow.
of his new movies.
Where is he local? I mean, around
Yeah,
here?
yeah, he's in
Oh, that's
Connecticut, and
cool.
for people who live in Connecticut, it's in the Bristol area.
Cool.
So yeah,
Oh, that sounds fun.
so I'm loving. I'm right now because it's a sequel to a horror movie he wrote called Head, which is obviously a play on words, but these kids go into it's based on the old '80s horror movies where kids goes into the woods, and of course bad things happen. So now they're on part three. So I'm writing part three for him.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
So that's
Like
that
cringy, right? Cringy.
love cringy. Cringy and
It's
funny.
like,
It's a good mixture.
wow. It reminds, it's funny because I was talking about, I played the soundtrack to, oh God, what was the name of it? The Big Easy. I like Zydeco. So I was
Yep.
playing the soundtrack from the Big Easy, and then I was talking to Jack about the movie No Easy, and then No Mercy, and I have my Google Home, and I'm like, when I ask Google Home, about the plot, like play, and what's the plot of it? It started talking about Stephen King's It every time. It was like, and I'm like, why is it talking? And Jack's like, because you're saying what's the plot of it.
That's funny. It's almost like Abbott and Costello. Who's on first?
I know. Pennywise is in the gutter. No, I know. It's
That's funny.
I know. And I'm like, why is it doing too much fun?
Uh,
Oh,
well, speaking of things that you said you want to be involved in more. You've been involved in a lot of things. One of the things I want to talk about that you were involved in, you were asked to participate in Hair in the Wind. What was that?
oh my God, that was amazing. It was an international project. Um, that was the brainchild and curated by this Italian, well, she's actually French, but she lives in Italy. Her name is Angie, Antne, or something like that,
Hmm.
where it was in support of and rebellion against the young woman who got killed for having a lock of her hair come out of her hijab. Um, and so it was to address Hair in the Wind. It was to address that, and she had people from all over the world, men and women. And she did a sculpture, this giant sculpture that was like ropey hairs dangling from, a belfry or something like that. It was, pretty powerful. And then she had a festival in Italy, and some people went. I couldn't go, but she had me record video my Hair in the Wind poem, and she included that in the event, which I was very honored about.
Wow.
It was powerful. And I wrote about, it was a fan, it was about my grandmother. I wrote about my grandmother. I wish I had it printed out, but I don't. But it still gets to me when I read it.
And what year was this?
It was just what, 3 years, 2 or 3 years ago,
Oh, so
3
it's
years
very
ago.
recent then.
Yeah, yeah. And that was just that was a great opportunity. And she was she's a force to be reckoned with as well, and I should check in. We're friends on Facebook, but I haven't seen anything of hers lately. I should check in and see what she's up to. But she's an absolute delight. And yeah, and very powerful, like outspoken, and but in a not in a militant way, just in a very, well, like an artist would do,
Yeah.
like in your face, but aesthetic.
So it's sort of like that radio host that you talked about. You're a writer. Oh, sure, you're a writer. Read me
Yeah, yeah,
something.
right. You're a writer. Yeah, what do
Yeah,
you write?
whatever.
I know, that was so funny.
That's hilarious. Well, another
Yeah,
project that you were involved in was called Read Our Lips Project. What's that all about?
I'm working on that now. It didn't really take off yet. Um, it's kind of in response to women's rights being threatened, and the administration's lack of support thereof. And so I was working on it with a friend of mine who's also a bit of a, what would I call her? Not anarchist, but she's very powerful and rebellious, and not afraid to chest butt, politicians and things.
Yeah.
So it was a women's art project. She had to go on to some other things. So it's kind of I'm reformulating it, but I'm not ready to bring it forward just yet.
Okay. So it's in
So
the
when the
works.
time comes, I'll let you know. But she's gone on. She's amazing. She's a real entrepreneur. She's a publicist. She had a very, very robust massage therapy practice in Manhattan before the pandemic, had people working for her, and she'd go back. Her name is Lori Towers. She would go backstage and work on Rockettes and Alvin Ailey Dancers and Broadway show. I mean, she was a real, and she had, Yankees and Giants and Jets coming to her studio. But now she's doing something. It's a line of jewelry that she is curating called Axe the Oligarchy.
Wow.
And it's earrings and necklaces and bracelets and belly rings and things. And it has the Viking two-headed, axe handles. I have one. She sent me a Joan of Arc, Sword of Catherine cross. And so that's her way of rebelling, I guess. So yeah, but Read Our Lips, I mean, it's not dead, but it's being reconfigured, because it's like we couldn't get it off the ground. All I can say, it was a little too controversial.
Uh, yeah,
And
unfortunately, as we
so
talked about off air, some people are offended too easily, and
yeah.
it's just you can't, now in this cancel culture. It's difficult to.
Oh, we had one radio interview, and then we had another one lined up.
Yeah.
And when the female hosts found out the specifics,
Yeah.
they canceled us.
Oh my God! Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Well, they said they had to reschedule us,
Yeah.
never to be scheduled again.
Yeah. You know what that means.
Even though we were in touch. So it's like, okay. And so Lori was like, well, this is not being acceptable, not being accepted. So time to move on to something else. And it's very time consuming. And so it's one of those things that's simmering on the back burner for me, but I definitely would like to resuscitate it.
And are you gonna get other people involved?
Not as a partner, but yeah, I mean, it would involve women contributing
Yeah.
to be a part of it, like a movement kind of a thing.
All right.
But I wouldn't have a partner. Lori was a partner in crime, but no, I would be flying solo. If she wanted to jump back in, she'd be welcome to. But like I said, she's busy doing things. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
But that's the problem when you have a lot of ideas.
I know.
simple.
I think it's best for you to collaborate, but not have a partner. If you know what I mean. Like, it's good maybe just collaborate on a couple projects, but being solo seems to work best for you.
Yeah, yeah. But I like being on a team too. I
Yes.